In a time of ancient gods, evil warlords and treacherous kings, a land in turmoil cried out for a hero with the beauty of a Greek goddess. Yes, a female superhero. And she would come in the form of a virtually unknown New Zealand actress named Lucy Lawless. Almost from the moment it debuted in September 1995, Xena Warrior Princess was a smash hit. Fans and critics of both genders fell head over heels for the statuesque Xena. And overnight, Lawless skyrocketed to worldwide fame. As Xena, Lucy Lawless became the mighty blue-eyed warrior princess. Her powerfully sexy persona orchestrated perfectly with the show's dark and twisted tales that swirled with savage battles, riveting displays of martial arts, and a brutal wit. With the aid of her trademark blood-curdling battle cry, her deadly chakram, and the close companionship of her energetic sidekick Gabrielle, she would not only save the lives of countless imperiled villagers, but also justify the faith of the show's creators. For prior to her groundbreaking first season, it was unthinkable that an action drama could succeed with a female superhero in the lead. But Xena kicked that myth goodbye.
Xena just, I think, came along at the right time and the right place, the right time, the right idea. They bottled a bit of lightning.
I think that people really wanted to see a strong female character.
I think everyone was ready for a woman superhero, and certainly it's spawned a plethora of them.
She was a heroic figure for a lot of people. I would say for a lot of young girls, but I think she had a wider appeal than that.
The guys wanted to see a woman who could take charge too. You know, it wasn't interesting to see the woman in distress story anymore. It was much more interesting to turn that around and see a guy in distress and have the woman come and save her.
You're pretty good against unarmed men. How are you against someone who can fight back?
My impression in this business is that a lot of people have a lot of attitudes about a lot of things until those things become successful, and then they change their attitudes.
Xena definitely does not get the respect that it deserves. It was always taken as sort of like, oh, it's a syndicated show. It's not real, it's not network. It's not important enough. It's like, oh, that's that little funny Greek mythology show or whatever, oh, the spin-off from Hercules.
At first, it was just getting the Hercules crowd. And everybody kind of considered it like you were getting old drive-in movies on TV.
People think of it as, oh, that Xena thing. But I think in years to come, people will realize that it's such a unique concept and such an incredible thing that we're able to pull off this huge period pieces on television budget.
I think it wasn't probably till the second season that people started to take Xena more seriously and realized that it had a bigger audience base than Hercules.
I know that in the early days of Hercules and Xena both, people tended to have a bit of a haughty attitude about them. And then they found out that people were watching them and liking them, and then all of a sudden you saw a lot of knockoffs of these shows. You saw a lot of shows that tried to be these shows and weren't. They weren't anywhere near as good.
When Inside TV Land does a retrospective 20 years from now on women in television, they'll do a section on Xena, because she was a strong, no-nonsense, I can stand on my own woman.
So, I don't know, if people had problems with shows, that's their problem. I don't care. I think they were good shows.
Rob Tapper, the executive producer, called me up one day and said he had an idea for a new 3-episode arc that was going to introduce this female warrior. And he had the perfect actress for it, too. This very pretty, blonde English actress named Vanessa Angel.
Finally, the actress that they cast in the part got sick and couldn't show up, and so they cast Lucy in the part.
We'd worked with Lucy a number of times before. She played at least 3 other parts earlier in the Hercules series and in the movies. But she was just somebody we all really liked a lot.
I think the question that people asked me a lot when Xena was shooting was, what's Lucy like and how tall is she? For some reason, everyone thinks she's 6'3" and she's hard as nails, or did when the show started. And they didn't realize that she's not really that big, but that there's this soft, wonderful woman inside there. And that all started to come out in season 2 and 3. You really began to see that part of Lucy.
Hey, boys. Wanna play?
Lucy had an idea, and she knew what she wanted the character to be. And I think we were there to make sure that she got there. And then, you know, by the time, however many episodes in, you know, it was by rote. You know, she knew it.
Give me that child.
Better do it.
Don't be afraid.
It was fun shooting, having Lucy shoot fire out of her mouth. That was actually kind of fun. I couldn't believe she was going to do it. I got down there and I said, you know, in this script, Lucy really going to shoot fire? And I go, oh yeah, she's done it before. I go, cool, let's do it. And it's pretty exciting when you see her do it on the set. She just goes right to it.
I was the least experienced of all the directors that worked on the show first season, on all of the Hercules TV movies too. But there were a lot of us that really didn't know what we were doing, at least as far as television was concerned. A lot of people that came from features. And that was good and bad. It was bad in the sense that we made mistakes that more experienced people wouldn't have made.
We had a great time playing in the first season with a lot of different styles and trying to evolve a kinetic style that would keep the audience just like enthralled by how quickly we were moving.
But there were also a lot of things that we didn't know we couldn't do, and so we attempted a lot of things that wiser people probably would have demurred from. And a lot of what we did that was different, I think, at that time is we did bigger action scenes than most people were doing.
Rob Tapert gave us homework. He gave us a whole bunch of Hong Kong action films that we took home to watch. And so he told us about the style he wanted to do in the show.
Rob Tapert, who was our executive producer, who was a big fan of the Hong Kong action movies, wanted that style of fighting. And so that was the approach, and that was kind of the approach from the beginning, to do kind of a Hong Kong version of ancient Greece.
I've just blocked off the flow of blood to your brain. You'll be dead in seconds unless I release you.
By the way, Rob Tapert does have a cameo in the pilot episode for anybody who wants to look. In the final fight, where Xena and Draco are fighting on the villagers' heads, the very last person whose head is getting stood on is Rob Tapert.
He gave us pretty free rein in terms of how we wanted to direct it. He had a second unit down there, and so, you know, they knew how he wanted the action sequences to be. But, you know, we were, you know, starting from scratch, and so it was kind of fun to be in one of the first few directors, and still everybody trying to find their voice when you're down there. Even by the time I got down there, everyone was still trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this?
We were borrowing heavily on Xena all the time from Hong Kong filmmaking. We would see a fight and would say, let's do our version of that. The big ladder fight in Xena is, of course, lots of wire work, but we're also, if you watch that, the camera is zooming and twisting. It's on a double Dutch dolly head, so the camera's twisting, turning. People for a while were calling me the Dramamine director, but I was just trying to infuse this whole show with an energy and kinetic nature.
We did a lot of wire gags and things that are so standard in film now. There was a lot of invention that had to go on simply because we had so few resources to work with.
I had done several shows that had a lot of action sequences, particularly martial arts. Knowing that I had second unit, I was curious in how it was all going to work. And really what happened was that you directed the fight sequence with Lucy and with Renee and any guest star when they had to be seen.
Anytime it would get to the point of wire work, you'd have Lucy or Renee or any of the actors, they'd go running toward a wall and then get there and stop. And then it would be picked up by second unit with stunt people on wires.
And then second unit carefully went over what you shot, made sure that they matched the reverses with the stunt people or Zena's stunt double and whoever was, you know, shooting at the time, plus all the stuff that you don't have time to do. I mean, it takes a long time to put somebody in a wire and hang them up in the air and then kick 4 people and spin them around and do it several times, make sure you get it right, and then of course the wire has to be removed back, you know, back in post-production.
Another thing that made these shows possible was the second unit. It was brilliantly set up.
I was forever in awe of what the second unit produced with the resources that they had. We might have had 5 lighting people, they probably had 2 or 3. They would get more resources if they had particularly big days. And on some episodes, they even ended up shooting more days than main unit. The classic one was Callisto, where they spent, I think, 9 days on the ladder fight sequence. And that was kind of a record, I think, probably in fast turnaround TV anywhere in the world, to have a second unit spend 9 days on a sequence where the main unit's only shooting 7 or 8 is pretty bold. But it made the show. It was a great-looking show.
I had never worked with that before. I'd never worked with a second unit where they took actually a lot of the action away from you. You had to create the initial framework for it and shoot the stars, shoot the actors, shoot their side. And then when they went into the reverses, over Zena's shoulder, onto the villain, that sort of thing, or onto the whatever the heavies were who were attacking her, the second unit shot that stuff. That took me a little while to get my head around, just to understand I wasn't going to shoot everything. I really resisted that to begin with.
Everyone always has to remember that Hercules and Xena were sister-brother shows, working out of the same office, a lot of the same people overlapping. There was a very formal style to Hercules with the crew. They all came from film. They were sort of the A film crew in New Zealand. And when Xena started out, they got the rock and roll, rock video crew to do that.
One of the things that was scariest to me at the time was breaking in a new crew. I was concerned that the crew that we had for Xena was not going to be as good as the crew we had for Hercules. Somehow I thought that the cream of the crop of New Zealand filmmaking was given to Hercules and that whoever was left over was going to do Xena. In that case, I was completely wrong. We had a great crew. And if anything, they were faster and more efficient than they had been on Hercules.
You know, a good crew is a good crew, and we have good crews. They might do things differently, they might approach things with a different point of view, but they were very proud of what they did.
They're like MacGyver. They can make something out of anything. So I had a scene with Tommy Atkins, Xena's father, on a horse. He's a wonderful actor and very, very uncomfortable on horses. I said to the chief grip, Dennis, wonderful guy, can you rig me up something that we can put him on so we can move him across there? He gave it 2 minutes thought, grabbed a couple of pipes, slapped something together in almost no time at all, and put him on the back of an ATV all-terrain vehicle. And we shot him tight there, and we moved him across the scenery, and it was absolutely convincing.
I remember, I think it was with TJ as well, we did a horse chasing sequence as part of Callisto, where we had to have Lucy galloping along sand dunes with Callisto chasing her behind, and you could do wide shots with doubles on the second unit, and that was fine, but he really wanted to get tight shots like this in here on Lucy. And I'm not even sure how the idea came about or who refined it, but what we essentially ended up doing was having Xena static on a hobby horse. We just made some boxes with a saddle on that she could sit on, and we put her on a little dolly that would track backwards and forwards, and we did the same with Callisto. We put her further back on another hobby horse, and then we put the camera way away from them, probably 300 meters on a very long lens to condense it. And essentially, as the camera moved backwards and forwards and the actors moved backwards and forwards relative to each other, you couldn't tell that they weren't actually galloping and weren't moving. And with a bit of healthy shaking the camera and whiz-panning on and whiz-panning off, in the finished thing you were totally convinced that they were galloping along at high speed, chasing each other along the sand dunes, whereas in fact they weren't actually moving anywhere. And we ended up doing that quite often for those kind of insert sequences.
I was terrified about just breaking in a new crew and how slow it would be, because I knew we were going to do a higher level of action and more like Hong Kong cinema, which meant I just had to shoot more. I needed more coverage, just needed more takes of everything.
There was the problem with just the fact that there was just absolutely was no overtime down there, which was unusual if you're coming from Hollywood. That it was a surprise a couple of times when just on the dot at 7 o'clock it was over, and if it was going to go 2 minutes over, the crew had to take a vote on it, and that was a big surprise.
And that's it. 7 o'clock, you stop. It's 7 to 7, and I needed more overtime, and so I went to my AD and said, "Look, I really need about another hour to finish the scene." And my AD said, "All right, let me ask the crew when they vote on it." And I said, "They what?" They go, "Oh yeah, the crew votes on your overtime." So I'm watching this whole process as my AD goes to the key members of each department and say, you know, the director would like overtime, they need to shoot the thing, you know, we had a problem, we didn't call the king in, it's partly our fault, and this and that. And so they gave me the hour overtime, but it took 15 minutes to get it, so I actually only got 45 minutes, and I did get the shots. But from then on, I realized this is not like here in the States or up in Canada or another production. You're not going to get any overtime. And so there you have to figure it out. You have to compromise.
Hello, Draco.
Zena, you look good.
So do you.
When we started shooting Xena, it was the little sister. Hercules was shooting on 35mm cameras and had far larger budget than Xena, and Xena was shooting with little 16mm cameras that really at the time not a lot of shows were shooting anymore in 16, and I thought, oh, I don't know, I feel like you're almost stepping backwards to go and shoot the 16, and I got on set and realized this is the perfect way to shoot this show. It's so light and mobile, and we wanted to do neat things where we just put the cameras onto wires and twisted them around, and we wanted to put them on top of the cameraman and send him sailing down on wires. At times we would attach the camera to the stunt double, and so that the feet of like Callisto would go flying down and land on a ladder, and when all these things worked out great in 16mm.
I don't think the budget dictated 16 at the time. I think, and I may be mistaken, but I was under the impression that Rob Tapert wanted a grittier type of look than opposed to Hercules, which was pristine 35mm film. And so they purposely went to 16mm in the beginning, which is fine. It's a lighter camera. It's a little easier to load, and and it saves the backs of the crew when they're lugging it around.
The problem with shooting in 16mm was, and one of the reasons we were told not to use special effects is my understanding was there really wasn't any reliable pin-registered 16mm cameras, which meant that you couldn't do background plays. You couldn't do composites. So there were a few shots, I believe, in the pilot episode of Xena where we did composites. I think they mainly dealt with the shock room when it was flying around and bouncing off of things. And I believe that for those few shots we knew had to be composites, we shot those in 35mm with the Mitchell, I think.
Xena actually went in the middle of season 2 to 35mm, and that was done for high-resolution purposes.
In fact, it may have been the first year and a half, I think, halfway through season 2. The decision was made to go to 35, and normally a DP would jump at the chance because you get the better resolution and the finer grain and more choice of lenses. But we were almost like, well, is this going to make the show something else that it's not?
So I don't think the budget dictated 16. I think it was just actually a look and a style. There's a slight grittiness to 16. We were more handheld on Xena than we would ever be on Hercules, and so we kind of. It's easier when the camera's that small, and you're able to kind of move it around a little quicker.
Immortal Father Zeus in heaven, curse this brute if he eats me. Torture him with the slain serpent's blood and the crow's droppings.
Shut up! I hate chatty food.
I know Xena, the warrior princess.
I hate Xena, the warrior princess. She blinded me.
Because of our historical respect for visual effects technology, we often approached certain signature effects in a way that would be representative of even characters, and our Cyclops is a good example of that. We would sit down and design shots that involved what's called a nodal point forced perspective.
It was fun to reinvent old techniques. Well, like I said, we did forced perspective, and I think that may have been one of the first times it was done in New Zealand. Peter Jackson ended up using it a lot in Lord of the Rings. But we would set up our forced perspective platforms. And forced perspective is a very old, very simple technique where basically the thing that you want to have bigger, like say the giant, is closer to the camera, and the thing you want smaller is further from the camera, and you cheat the eye lines. And you usually put the foreground element up on a platform to make them look so that their feet are matching up and it looks like they're further back. And then if you have enough light so you can hold your depth of field, it works pretty well.
Guess that job I did on your eye must have cut down on the people eating, huh?
Ever since you blinded me, a day hasn't gone by where I haven't dreamt of tasting your flesh.
We did an in-camera effect in The Reckoning, which took about 2.5 hours to set up. I just sound like a director who's going to complain about how much time everything took. But in this case, again, in the early days, they were learning. They were learning a lot of stuff. And so I remember this one shot in The Reckoning where we went from one set to another, where we dissolved the actors from one set into another in camera. It took 2.5 hours. I thought we were never going to get this shot, and I had about 20 shots that were coming behind it. So that took time, and again, of course, they learned how to do that faster.
There is a shot in Sins of the Past when Xena is first disarming, I think the character's name is Hector. He was Draco's lieutenant at the time. And she takes her sword and she whips it around his, and the camera zips up into a tree. And it zipped up, and I think it was looking at a reflector or something at the end of the shot. And second unit then took that and did a matching pan, whipping up to a tree where the sword was stuck and there it was going bling. And in editing, you cut those two pieces together on the blurred frame, and it looks like it's one shot. And those are things that you can do. They're in-camera techniques. They're very effective. We did a lot of that.
I think one of the things I really loved about the challenge of shooting Xena was that through Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert and the whole history of The Evil Dead, they brought a lot of in-camera techniques to the front, which we had never ever really used or considered, and it was amazing to just simple cheesy little things like whiz pans could really enhance battle sequences, fight sequences.
We also did shifted mirror shot, which is the technique that's at least 100 years old. There's a German cinematographer, I believe, named Shifton, who devised it originally, where you set up a mirror at a 45-degree angle and you have a full-size set off in one direction and you have a miniature set off in the other, and you scrape the silver off the back of the mirror so that part of the mirror becomes a window and it's looking through at the full-size set and it's reflecting the image of the miniature set. It was just an early form of a composite. So we did that. We did things like mirror shots. We did glass paintings, a number of those, where we'd actually set up a large plate of glass in front of the camera and we would paint a village or a castle or something on the glass itself and shoot it. And some of those things worked better than others, but it was fun. It was a lot of experimentation.
Sometimes with the effects, in some of the episodes, we decided that we could go low-tech. You could be cheesy if that was right for the episode. And some episodes would have fallen apart if we'd had cheesy effects, so we put more money into them. And there was this incredible balance that Eric Grundemann was able to do, realizing which episodes needed money for effects and which ones you could pull them back and go a little bit cheesy. We often used visual effects to extend the sets, and sort of one of my mottos is that the audience has more imagination than we have set, so don't show them the whole set. Just shoot it tight.
Open the gates! Come on now! Come on, hurry!
You know, Auckland is right in the just about the narrowest part of the country. In fact, there's a part of Auckland where you can walk across the country in about 3 hours. It's about 5 miles wide, the neck of the North Island. And what you've got on either side of that is you've got an ocean. You've got the Pacific on one side, and you've got I don't know if it's the Tasman Sea or whatever it is on the other side, and they're at war with one another all the time. So the weather systems are always at battle. So on any given day, I shot in one day. You could shoot in sun, you could shoot in rain, you could shoot in sun with rain, you could shoot with clouds, without clouds. It made you nuts. So you learned very quickly to get your wide shots as quickly as you could and get into coverage.
The other big challenge was the weather in Auckland around the equinox, the change of seasons. The wind blows constantly and it blows clouds because Auckland is on an isthmus between two major oceans. We attract a lot of clouds, and directors from North America really couldn't believe it when they came down to do their first episode, and the weather would be going cloud, sun, cloud, probably at 10 or 15 second intervals. And I think I'm slowly have lost the sight of my left eye from spending hours and hours and hours looking with a glass at the clouds going in front of the sun.
We do large matte paintings, and there'd be this huge cloud that would roll over during the take that involved the left side of frame, and then all of a sudden we get ready to set up the center part of frame, and then there'd be no cloud. Rain was another thing too. A lot of times if you really, really watch those episodes, and this is a testament again to Donnie Duncan and all the DPs that were on the show. It's like they were really smart about trying to photograph around rain.
If you look carefully in Death in Chains, there's a scene between Gabrielle and the young man that she's interested in that show. I forget his name, but in the coverage, when you've got Gabrielle single, it's nice and bright and shiny, and when you cut to him, it's raining behind him. And we intercut it once or twice. I think we got away with it because it's very tight. But there's that kind of thing all the time, sure. It just used to drive you crazy. And there were times when we would have to sit around and wait for 2-3 hours for the weather to pass.
The rain was a big pain. It's probably one of the biggest drawbacks of shooting down there, because we would be shooting in the stages were not real stages, they were just warehouses. But they were warehouses with tin roofs on top. So you'd be shooting in the middle of a scene, and it would just start pouring, and it would just you'd ping, 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 all the way through, and these scenes had to be dubbed over. They had they had to ADR the scene and redo the voice.
That's not so bad, but mud is hard. It's hard to deal with when you're trying to shoot action. And when we had to set up the forced perspective platforms for the blind Cyclops sequence, we had a problem because the platforms kept sinking into the mud, and so that would change our eye lines and little things like that you don't anticipate. There was a lot of flu and colds going around, and I got laryngitis during the first episode, and that was an unexpected complication.
Some guys never give up.
The production design team was remarkably skilled at using a lot of the natural materials in New Zealand. They were so familiar with their trees, their river, their topography. They were able to take the materials out of nature and incorporate them and use them in the show. But then they were also incredibly high-tech and able to take foams and make things out of foam and make it look like it was period and that it belonged in this incredible landscape of New Zealand.
The attention to detail, the absolute demand for really high-quality work was a hallmark of these shows.
These guys were incredible. The great thing about Xena, I would read a script, and they would say, okay, we need to build this in Cradle of Hope, we need to build this Pandora's box, which has a hand on it. And I go, okay, fine. Well, they have to build everything. Everything was built from scratch. And you just kind of wonder what these things are going to look like when they get out of the shop.
Rob Gillies, the production designer on Xena and on Hercules, is one of the most phenomenal brains I have ever met in my life. He's the most pleasant, gentle man. Somewhere in there, he has compartmentalized so much. He's doing 2 huge period shows. At any one time, he was working on 6 different episodes, 3 Xenas, 3 Hercules at the same time, and he kept every one of them straight, every set straight, and he always treated everyone like they were the only person in the world when he was speaking to them.
The challenges in designing for the Xena show were numerous. Mainly the speed that you had to work at. If I got a script, I would get a script probably 3 weeks out from a show. So I would have about a week to get my act together with what I could do in that week, then a couple of days to draw it. So I would draw it up, just sort of scribbles and crazy sketches, then flick it over to all of my people who were going to have to turn around and take it from the drawings to manufactured objects.
The very first time I worked with them was actually on Hercules, and Rob said, well, here's 8 pillars made out of foam that you have, and here's a few curtains made out of silk. Now this is your castle. Take it, you can make a hallway, you can make a square room, you can make anything you want. The crew will turn and move it around for you. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I've got to go. I've got to get it. Somehow he took these things and he designed them. It was unbelievable. And then when we did Greeks Bearing Gifts, he built this whole castle for me, and I was like, wow, we've gone from a couple of pillars in one episode to an entire castle on another one. The guy's just a phenomenal brain.
So for the castle, we just built the front of it. And we couldn't really afford to build a big castle, so I had a piece of land that we used to shoot on a lot. And that, fortunately, was a very contoured landscape, little landscape. So there was a gully there which was all covered in scrub and low bush, which we cleared. And it gave us a bit of a hill. And so if we put our sort of whatever castle we could at the top of the hill, we knew that when we were down in the gully, we would have that much more dramatic than we would if we stuck it on the flat. So we sort of tried to use bits of the landscape that were giving us something for nothing.
He had become the production designer on Hercules the first season, and he was great. He was really a pleasure to work with. Very logical, very efficient. I thought he did just a great job. And he, as so many people were doing at that time, he was one of the departments that just doubled up. They had a full workload on Hercules, but somehow they managed to do Xena at the same time. Rob Gillies did that, the costume designer, Nyla Dixon, who also went on to do Lord of the Rings.
It's to Nyla Dixon and Rob Gillis' credit that they were able to develop processes on Xena that were obviously rolled right over into production process for Lord of the Rings with regards to costume design and art direction.
Xena really was the testing grounds for Lord of the Rings, right down to the wardrobe designer, Nyla Dixon, who was unbelievable on Xena. They saw that on Xena and on Hercules and took her, and she was able to take a lot of what she had learned and move it over to Lord of the Rings. I mean, really, if you look at those shows back to back, you see so many influences of Xena in Lord of the Rings.
I strung him up for the vultures.
It's interesting. The producers realized very early on that they were going to delve into mythology, and they realized that Xena couldn't have traveled through all the mythological times that they wanted to delve into. So it became known early on that we were going to be cheating time, we were going to be cheating mythology, and that was fine. We accepted that. We said, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to let the audience know, too, that we know we're cheating time, we know we're cheating mythology, so sort of in a way wink at it and try and tell the story so that we can perhaps educate people, but not say this is exactly what mythology. We're not following it to the T.
I think we learned very quickly to feel no responsibility to the myths. I mean, they took such liberties. They made, in this one show, which one is it? Death in Chains, I think, when Hades comes and Xena draws her sword and he says, hey, relax, I'm a fan. Well, once you're into that world, you can do just about anything.
Always ready for a fight. That's why I like you, Xena.
Hades.
God of the underworld.
What do you want?
Hey, relax, I'm a big fan.
let's face it, Xena was not exactly historically accurate, okay? You know, you can't have somebody be in the Trojan War and then see Caesar. It just isn't going to work. But, you know, you suspend that disbelief, you know, watching the show. But I found the biblical references. I tried to stay true to their legends. Later on in Altered States, the whole thing about sacrificing your son is a total biblical reference. And so I approached that episode in a much grander scheme. I had wide vistas. I had very wide shots of very small people. I'm trying to get that, you know, trying to get that epic look.
I love you, Father.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene in Greeks Bearing Gifts was really the Trojan horse coming in through the door and seeing, to me, that's where I felt there was a little bit of need to try and stick with mythology and have a full-size Trojan horse and have it stay there overnight and have the team drop out. I grew up with mythology, and to create that, go, wow, this is so cool. It was a real high point. It felt like epic TV making.
Open the gate! Hurry! Open the gate! Open them!
Well, my favorite scene in Doctor in the House is inventing CPR and Xena waking up Gabrielle and saving her, and having that moment where that you realized that this ragtag little girl that Xena had picked up along the way, who was a bard, who was a bit of an annoyance, she was falling in love with. And the tears of, I am about to lose someone that I love.
No. Come on, Gabrielle. Come on. Come on. Don't leave me. Don't you leave me! Don't leave me! Don't leave me! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
Oh, mighty Asclepius, we beseech.
He'll die unless you cut off that leg.
What? Lose my leg? I don't want to lose my leg.
Can't I work in peace?
Doctor in the House was really interesting in terms of gore and guts and what we could do. We were doing a story that dealt with tracheotomies, with cauterizing amputated legs. There was a lot of blood that went in there. It was difficult to know in our time period what we could put on the air. I did a cut of that show that the censors would not pass. And Rob Tapert and Lucy Lawless and Eric Grundeman fought the network, fought the censors, fought everyone, and we held that show for 3 months. It didn't air when it was supposed to. And Rob Tapert said, I love this the way it is so much right now that I don't want to trim it. And there were sequences in there where the censors said, you are showing on camera a leg being cut off. And Rob's going, no, we're not. It's all in the cutting. It's in your mind. You're hearing it. And they had to go back frame by frame and see that we had created a sequence where in their mind they thought a leg was being chopped off on camera, but it wasn't. In the end, I think 60 seconds of my original cut got taken out, and then it passed, and that's how it aired. And Rob always says he would love to have at some point done on DVD the full sequence the way we did it originally, without the 60 seconds cut out.
Hold him down. He'll be more in shock than in pain.
The pilot episode was Sins of the Past. As fond as I was of directing action, I really was enjoying doing the drama in the show. One of my favorite scenes in the episode was the scene between Gabrielle and her sister, Renee O'Connor and Willa O'Neill, when Gabrielle was saying goodbye to her sister. That was my favorite scene. It was interesting when Rob Tapert had seen the dailies for that. He The next day he said, well, now I know we're doing a different show than Hercules. And Hercules, the only time we had two women talking together, one of them was chained to a wall.
What's in the bag? Bella. I'm going to join up with Xena. Are you serious? Absolutely. I'm going to be a warrior, like her. A warrior? Gabrielle, I can beat you up. Yeah, but you're very strong for your age.
I also liked doing the scenes between Xena and her mother in the tavern. And I think those were some of the scenes that helped define the show as much as the action did. Because they're, you know, as silly as this world was that we were creating, we wanted it to have a sincerity. We wanted the characters in the story to believe completely in what was going on.
Weapons aren't welcome in my tavern. Neither are you. What are you doing here?
Mother, listen. The warlord Draco is marching on this valley.
And you need to borrow a few men for an army, right?
I can help organize a defense.
Give it up, Xena.
I know Draco. I know the way he thinks. I know what his weaknesses are. If we act now, we stand a good chance of stopping him.
You think we're fools? We all remember what happened the last time you talked like that.
Well, one of my favorite scenes is when Renee is playing drugged, because she played it so well. Renee's funny, because if she had to be in a certain mode, if she had to be other than just Gabrielle, she would gear up for it by kind of lapsing into that, even when the camera wasn't rolling. So I remember I was walking around the set, and they were lighting the set, and they said, hey, Renee, how you doing? I'm fine. I mean, she was playing the role, and I said, okay, gotcha, I'm there, you know? And she was totally getting into it. It was a fun scene because it's the first time where Lucy is playing the straight man, and Renee gets to play the comedy. And she played it great, and she was game for anything I wanted to do. We did the scene where she's crying because she can't find the boy. She forgot where the boy was, and she goes out of frame, and then, you know, I said, well, okay, you know, instead of just popping up behind her, I said, Renee, crawl in front, and the audience won't care how you got there. Just pop up in front of her, and, you know, Lucy's doing this look like, how did you get there? It was a tremendous amount of fun to shoot.
By the way, how much nut bread did I concede?
None. You know, I really wanted to share, but it was just too good. And he said he wasn't hungry, and then the next thing I knew, it was just gone.
It's okay. There's no sign of a struggle. My guess is he went to get his mother. Aside from us, she's his only ally.
What are we waiting for? Let's go!
The Reckoning's the one where she's chained, isn't it? We went in to shoot that. The morning we went in to shoot the first scene in the cell, they had a kind of a stock or something that her arm was going to be put over her neck, and her arms were going to be in it, and she was going to be chained to a wall or something like that. And I looked at that and I thought, that's ugly, that's not attractive. This was very early in the series, so I said, no, let's put her up, let's hang her from the rafters and spread her out like that. And so we set it up like that. That took a little time to re-rig all of the chains and that sort of thing. Then we did that without Lucy there, and then Lucy walked in and she said, oh, that looks like sexual fetishism, and jumped right in. All right, chain me up, boys, let's go. My favorite scene was, I liked that scene where we chained her up. For that reason, we had a lot of fun with that. I happen to like in that show, I love the dialogue between Ares and Xena. It's very uncharacteristic of most of the Xena stuff. There's a lot of dialogue, and it's just the two of them in a room talking. It got very difficult. We were under pressure because Kevin Smith was doing a play at the time, and he had to get out at a certain time of the day. I only had him for a certain amount of time to shoot. So I was restricted as to how we shot it. There were certain things that I just didn't have time for. So we kept it pretty simple, and what I liked about it was it became a very interesting scene between the two of them, just dialogue. It had a feeling of like Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast to me. Lots of dialogue, more dialogue I think than there was in almost anything else I shot in those things. But the two of them were so terrific and looked so good that they worked out very well. That's probably my favorite scene in that show.
Ares.
Somehow I felt I might hear my name.
I want to talk about Kevin Smith because Kevin Smith, God rest his soul, was a fabulous actor who had a tremendous career ahead of him and tragically died a year or two ago in Beijing. And I know all directors felt this way about Kevin. When you would open up a script and you would see that Aries was going to be in it, you got more excited. It was wonderful to work with Lucy and wonderful to work with Renee. And the cherry on the sundae was if Kevin was going to be in it too. He was so creative and so enthusiastic and had such a sense of humility about him. This terrifically handsome and enormously buff guy was as sweet as could be with no egocentricity about him at all, and hilariously funny. He was a wonderfully funny guy, had a great sense of humor. And it was always just going to be such a treat to get to work with Kevin. And he'd do anything. He would do anything you wanted him to do, and he'd come up with some wonderful way to do it. I hung him upside down over a fire once and shot him, and he just did it. He said, all right, let's go, here we go. He would do anything, and he was just a fabulous actor, and it's a very, very, very sad thing that he's gone.
Even as an adversary, you are one of a kind.
I know my choice was the right one for me.
In that case, until next time.
Working with Doug Leffler, for me, was very interesting because as a designer who really had only worked in New Zealand, I really worked with a limited pool of directors, and Doug popped up to direct a show, and he was very precise, and he's a very skillful storyboard artist, and he had this immaculate way of storyboarding a sequence, especially an action sequence. And so for me, it was a real learning curve to be with someone like him, see him storyboard the action sequence, and then be part of breaking it down and figuring out how we were going to do it. So in many ways, he was a contributor to the sort of planning processes that we repeated on all of our shows.
Zena!
A deal's a deal.
There was a lot of energy from people that were really having fun and really wanted to make this work that went into that series, and there was a lot of improvisation of just technique and procedure, and I should also mention the producers, the line producers down in New Zealand, Eric Grundeman and Chloe Smith, were really great. I don't know how they actually got as much stuff for us to work with as they did, or figured out ways that they could give us as many days to shoot as we had. It was really a great team of people. And I haven't quite experienced anything as collaborative since then.
TJ Scott was absolutely wild, just out of this world. He kind of arrived halfway through the first season and really wanted to put his stamp on the show, and he certainly did. A lot of it was to do with technique. He'd come from a background as a stunt man and a second unit director and a stunt coordinator, and he also was real big on having what we call a dirty foreground, which is where you're tracking through bits and pieces of broken trees or railings or people going backwards and forwards or anything you can stack up in the foreground so that you get wipes through and reveal your actors in the background. He just loved all that kind of stuff. So his episodes were very camera-oriented. He understood a huge amount about camera, and he really basically set the benchmark for visual style from that point onwards. And a lot of what we learned on his shows we then take to other shows and convince other directors to do similar things.
Gabrielle? Perdiccas? Are you all right?
Open the gate! Open!
Television shows that I've done, you can always think of something you want to go back and do, but I can't think of anything that I really wanted to change in any of the Xena episodes that I did in season 1. It was all learning experience. It was all going quickly, and maybe even the things that I think we could have covered better or done, I like now. I like that they were raw. I think the rawness worked in season 1, and that gave us somewhere to go. The fact that everything wasn't perfect, it was a little bit edgy.
It was a pleasure always to work with Josh because he basically drove us nuts, but in a nice way. He was full of enthusiasm for the job and had a passion for shooting film and just shooting stunts and crazy action.
When I watch any of my movies or I watch anything I've directed, it puts me back to making it. That those moments have been captured on film, that reality for that moment during the time the camera was on till the camera turned off. That was my life at that moment. So I get to, all the movies and the TV get me to pull me back to when I made them.
Charlie was one of my favourite directors. He was an absolute gentleman. He was an actor's director because he had come from a background of being an actor. And it was kind of like a new career. He wasn't a young man, but what really amazed me about Charlie was he was so incredibly open and wanting to learn, especially the camera technical side of things.
Now that you do know, there is another side to life. Now tell me, are you really having more fun these days?
I'm fighting for a better world.
My orientation is acting. I'm an actor. I've been an actor all my career. I come to directing really very late. I've only been directing when I went down to do Xena. When I went down to do the first season of Xena, I think I'd been directing for about a year. And at my age, that's very late. So my orientation has always been acting. My strength as a director has always been in working with the actors. So a lot of my style, a lot of my shooting style really was very much determined by the actors, taken from what was going on between the actors, what was necessary for the scene, working with the actors, finding out what the actors were comfortable with, finding out what worked, and then determining how we shoot it from that. That's all my orientation.
Mike Levine came down fairly early in the first series, and the one thing I remember about Michael is that he loved to get a lot of setups every day, a lot of material, and he kind of set that up as a challenge. I think he came in one day saying he'd done a show in the States, Pacific Blue or something, and they'd done 58 setups in a day, and we were used to doing 25 maybe on a really good day, and with 2 cameras, maybe 30 or so. And we kind of thought, right, okay. And one day he came along with a shot list that I think had about 50 shots on it, and none of us had ever remotely covered anything like that. And it was a little bit of, everybody was compromising quality in order to get the coverage that he needed, but we all kind of ran with it. And I think at the end of the day, we ticked off everything on the shot list, and everyone was happy. And that, I'm pretty sure he definitely set the record for the most number of setups in a day. And I've never approached anything like it before or since.
As an episodic director, you're a guest. I mean, you know, you're the guy coming in this week to direct an episode. But when you direct a lot of the episodes of a show, you become part of the family. And I was fortunate enough to, in the first 2 seasons of Xena, I was down there enough where they felt like I was part of the family. And that's how everybody was. Everyone was happy to be doing and making something that they know was very good, and that people were watching, and people were enjoying. And I think that's what good television is all about.
It's interesting. I don't go back and watch episodes that I've directed very often, but with the event of TiVo, they now seem to pop up all the time on my screen. But I was at a fan convention not long ago, and there was a montage of sequences from Xena, and I saw a bunch of the stuff that I'd shot in there, and it was like, wow, it's like another lifetime ago, because it's a period piece and we were so saturated in the periods that we were playing out. And then looking at it up there, it draws incredible emotion, because it's not like watching a normal drama where you say, oh, that clothing looks outdated, oh, look at those hairstyles from way back then, that doesn't work. This was so far back in period that it still feels fresh, I think.
I attribute the charm of Xena to just being something new, something that hadn't been done, whether it was the time period or the fact that it was, you know, 2 women out fighting injustice, however you want to look at it. It was something new.
I think that these shows had a good heart. I think that they had a good intention, that they really did tell people something that was important and valuable. And I like that a lot, in addition to the fact that you got a lot of interesting action, a lot of very sexy babes and good-looking guys. So it's all done in a package that's very, very palatable.
You can't answer the question of why is Xena popular without really, trying to understand why Lucy is so much an attractive person as a person, and that's really where it all comes from. I could point at the effects, and I could point at the action, and I could point at any number of issues, right down to the New Zealand as a country, and I think all of that plays a part in it. But it's the personality that showed up on the screen and people's response to it. I know I certainly had that same response before she was Xena or anything else. She was just a very interesting person.
I think from series 1 of Xena, I will be most proud of the way everybody that I was involved with in the art department, just because it was the area that I was intensely involved with, how everybody just got their act together and got so good at what they did that we finished it in far better shape than we started, and we all had fun.
Whenever I see these shows, I have enormous feelings of love. I have feelings for all the people who are involved in them, from the actresses, for Lucy and for Renee, for Kevin Smith, and for all the people behind the camera. I have powerful feelings of affection and high regard, respect, and gratitude that I was involved in them.